Well, greetings. How is everybody today? If you haven't used the chat yet, please do say hello. We've got a jam-packed session today with a couple of great guests and some very, very useful tips and ideas for you today. So welcome to week 12 of the school version of the Financial Roundtable. Money isn't the most important thing in life, but it is reasonably close to oxygen on the gotta have it scale. Sometimes it can create a bunch of angst, which is why we gather every week to spend time as a community to look at financial related issues and opportunities, and also address very timely topics. And today is no exception. Certainly schools are a major part of the ecosystem, and we love having the opportunity to bring this session with you today. This week's guest will be Carrie Perkins. She is the lead Qnity in Action coach and director of trainers. And we've got a great share today with Carrie. I'm excited about it. We've also got a short segment by Chris Wittich, who's a CPA, also known as the Tax Tiger, with some timely information. Last week, we had some light bulb moments as it related to certain perception related topics. Perception as it relates to the beauty industry, and perception as it relates to other things that are on the minds of our audience. Perception requires looking at things through a new lens or another set of eyeglasses. And one of the things we briefly covered last week, and we will spend more time on this in the future, is an industry think tank that is the basis of most every major beauty and wellness association, the lead directors, presidents, et cetera, working as one to address industry related matters. And one big one has to do with perception and gathering data. And there's some new, really exciting data that's coming out as a result of this group that really demonstrates more, what is the right word here? Demonstrates what we all know, and that it is a great career choice. So there's certain findings and things that came out of some studies, which we'll share in future weeks. I'm sure I'll have some guests on here with this study. But one of the big things is to really identify the difference between a career professional and someone that really dabbles in pro beauty. And the difference is quite dramatic in terms of depending on what audience you're in. Career professionals overwhelmingly rate all the different things that are important to having a great career, which is finding a job, affordability, lifestyle. And so really, really great data we'll share in the future. Last week, we also talked about September being the real new year. And it's not just back to school, but it's a time to look at routines, different moves in your business or personally. It's a time for planning, budgeting, and renewal. So I invited Carrie on this, and we're going to take you through something called the 3 C's that allows you to use a very simple methodology to gain closure, clarity, and confidence for success and focus going forward. So super excited to have Carrie with us. Our sponsors on this roundtable, of course, are Qnity. We are here to help people not only earn great money, but do what they love and have a quality of life. Taking what's complicated, confusing, and overwhelming, and coming up with a clear path that is simple, visual, and actionable. Great to have Pivot Point as a sponsor of these roundtables, as well as a partner in our new financial success training called Money by Qnity, addressing some critical needs to prepare students with the financial challenges that await them after graduation. We certainly hope you'll become a money school. You can go to qnityforschools.com for more information about that. And on that website, you can book a demo. But again, that's the website, qnityforschools.com. I'm going to share with you some nuggets from that program in a little bit here. Also, shout out to Lightheart Sanders, CPAs, and Jared Sanders of Lightheart Sanders has a great benchmarking project. So if someone could type in the chat, Jared, if you're with us today and that benchmark study is still open. Why don't you put that in the chat? Perhaps Michelle can help too. Love the idea of doing this. There's no charge to be part of this study. Jared and his team, at great personal cost to them and their firm, are doing this project to create really great necessary data to help all of you become even more successful in the future. The 9-grid is one of our core visual thinking tools. We provide that as part of the invite to these roundtables. We are going to explore the 9-grid a little bit deeper today, heads up. And hopefully you can use the 9-grid to record your own light bulb moments, of which we hope you have plenty. I'm going to ask Chris to join me for a conversation. Chris, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm good. How are you?
Chris, you're double dipping today. I had you on the roundtable earlier this morning, and I invited you, sort of created an audible here because I felt the information was so important that I wanted to spend a little bit of time with you and address some of the myths and some of the things as it relates specifically to the employee retention credit. So good to have you again, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, why are you called the tax tiger?
Well, it dates back to high school. I was the ravenous tiger, then sort of morphed into the tax tiger when my career started, sort of in college and then starting out. But either is fine. Either the tax tiger or the ravenous tiger is fine by me.
So I was hit over the head this week by you. You didn't literally hit me over the head, but figuratively hit over the head with you and then someone else in terms of the employee retention credit and how many are either missing the opportunity or they're being misled, and there's all sorts of myths and what have you. So I want to spend a little bit of time because the dollars are so significant. So just by way of summary, we're going to not assume that everybody knows all of this. So just quickly describe the employee retention credit, what it is and what the advantage is and all that.
So the employee retention credit is for businesses impacted by COVID. Certainly a school would be a prime candidate. We've done some of these studies for schools. The realization on them has been, I think, very good. Similar to a standalone salon. I know sometimes that's part of a school even, but the schools, basically there are a couple ways to qualify. You could be totally shut down, or you could have these gross receipts tests. I know in the schools we've done that there have not met basically either of those. The third way to qualify is the most common, and that is having a partial restriction on your business. And so that's where if you have classroom size limits where you're like, well, normally we have 20 people in this class, the social distancing required by my state, I can only have 10 people. So I either got to do 2 classes or I got to rent more space so I can space everyone out, or they have to alternate or whatever. Stuff like that would be the restrictions in order to qualify the business. And then the calculations get complicated. You can't overlap with PPP, so you can't double dip on some of these benefits, but the business qualifies based on having these partial restrictions. And then you do this sort of complicated calculation, you file payroll tax returns, and you eventually get a check from the IRS. So we're talking about, it's a credit, but it's actual like cash. They will send you a check at the end of the, when they're done processing the returns, which is kind of a problem these days. But
now this didn't come from you, but somebody said to me, an expert in this area said they're surprised by the level of ignorance with this particular credit, even amongst professionals. Now you got a great firm, and Lightheart Sanders is a great firm. You guys are on top of it, clearly. But why is there so much confusion and ignorance and missed opportunity with this credit?
Yeah,
which, by the way, is massive.
It can be massive. Certainly could be looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes. It is the most, I've been working for 15 years. This is the most complicated thing I've ever done. And I've spent, hundreds of hours at this point this year alone on this, and it requires sort of all of those hundreds of hours. I don't know how like a solo practitioner would possibly do this. So, I mean, it is wildly complicated. And then there were a lot of questions when it first came out, and it took them like 6 months to answer some of those questions. And so it was just in like June and July, we finally got some answers. So I think a lot of people maybe looked at it early in the year. There were some unknown items and they said, nah, we're not going to get it. But some of that stuff has been clarified now this summer. And, definitely if I owned a school or a salon or anything like that, I would absolutely be looking at ERC because it's almost, I think the way you qualify is to have those partial restrictions, and, the overlap with PPP can be complicated, but that's not a reason to skip it. I think the biggest mistake people are making is just skipping it entirely, thinking they don't qualify when, every salon or every school that I've talked to so far has qualified for some.
So there's a handful of myths. We'll go through those and then we'll do
Sure.
more of a quick version of this today. So myth number one, if I was eligible for this federal relief credit, then my accountant or bookkeeper would have informed me and applied.
So that's definitely false. Hopefully your accountant was informing you of it, but they can't do this for you. I'm helping clients do it, but there's no way I could do it without their participation. There are a lot of questions I need to get from them, stuff that I don't have at my fingertips. And then at the end of the process, you file amended payroll tax returns, which, we sign them, but the client also has to sign them. So there's basically absolutely no way this has occurred without your being involved in some fashion, and certainly signing it at the end of it.
Second one is a myth, and this is a myth. A salon must show a 50% loss in revenue to qualify for ERC.
Yeah, that's definitely not true. That's one of the ways you could qualify. I would say the majority of salons and the schools that I've done these for have not met that test. If you have the partial restriction, so if you've got the spacing, which impacts your enrollment, stuff like that, it doesn't matter how high or low your revenue is. It is not in any way needs-based. It's based on you have those restrictions. If you manage them well and you manage to grow enrollment, that's fabulous. But you still get ERC. So it's just based on the restrictions. I would say most are not looking at the gross receipts. We can look at that, but that's definitely a myth that that's the way to qualify.
Third myth is if I receive PPP, then I am not eligible for ERC.
Yeah, that was true last year. It is not true anymore, and that's why it's a big deal. So you can't double dip, use the same person's wages for both, but they do allow you to have incredible flexibility to pick and choose when you use the wages for each of these different things and for different people. So it's an endless possibility of picking and choosing, which makes it complicated. But if you can pick and choose, then we can pick and choose a way that's most advantageous for you. So the complexity actually works in your favor there. But absolutely, all of the ones we've done, people have PPP1, they have PPP2 in most of the circumstances, and they're still qualifying.
Before I get to the next myth, you have some just rules of thumb on if someone qualifies for a PPP of say 100,000.
Yeah.
Depending on what state they're in, they might qualify for what?
Yeah. So, there's sort of a differentiation between the red states and the blue states. The blue states have a lot of rules that lasted a lot longer. The red states had less rules and they pulled them a lot quicker. So they had less restrictions. But what we're seeing is if you're in a red state, and you had 100 grand of PPP, you might be looking at maybe 50 to 100,000 of ERC. And in the blue states where you got more restrictions, I think a pretty realistic outcome is more like 100,000 to maybe 180.
Wow.
Certainly every situation is a little bit different, but those are the typical ranges that we're seeing for the projects that have been completed.
There's another piece as it relates to state by state you educated me on, because this is taxable this is taxable income
Mm-hmm.
federally, but
Yes.
certain states, and this is where Minnesota, did you catch my accent there? Minnesota, I lost my Chicago accent, and California actually are in a good spot with this from a tax standpoint, right?
Yeah, they've sort of stumbled into a good answer for once, but the IRS taxes this ERC, and there's, like 5 states that don't. There's another 5 that are sort of on the fence about it. But Minnesota and California are the 2 I care the most about because I'm in Minnesota and I got a lot of clients in California, but it's tax-free in those states. You just need to be very specific about how you're filing. You need to know that when you're filing your tax return, your income tax return. And I think a lot of people are missing that or just unaware because it's very complex, this idea of non-conformity, and some states don't conform. Usually that's bad results for places like Minnesota and California. And this one circumstance, it's a very good result. So it's tax-free. So, if you got 100 grand of ERC and you don't realize it's tax-free in Minnesota, you're just going to throw out, 10 grand.
Yeah, and let me clarify, it's free of state tax.
State.
Okay,
but it's still federally taxable. So
Yep.
the federal tax runs through at, whatever the personal tax rates end up being. So that's going to be different for everyone.
I got 2 more myths for you. I'm going to throw something into the group here. From a financial reporting standpoint, guys, what I would recommend, and I think, Chris, you would agree with this, from a financial reporting for your own internal books, I would put this under other income on the P&L as opposed to above the line. Now, when you file your tax return, it has to be reported in a separate place. In terms of internal bookkeeping, I would put it under other income. Comments, Chris?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a one-time thing or maybe a 2-time thing, 2020 and 2021, but you probably want to separate that as other income. That is not, sustainable. And when you're comparing sort of year over year results, you don't want it making your wages seem artificially low. I think that'll paint a weird picture. So internally, other income makes a lot of sense. On your tax return, it has to reduce the wage expense. So just be a little bit of a difference there between how you record it internally and how it ends up on the income tax return.
The other myth, a couple other quick myths here. If I can only receive a maximum of $5,000 per employee for ERC.
So that's partially true and partially not. For 2020, the limit is 5 grand per employee, but you could also qualify certainly in 2021, and there you could get another 7,000 first quarter and then potentially 7,000 second quarter. And I think a lot of schools would qualify for probably first and second quarter, especially in the blue states. So if you only qualified in 2020, then yeah, the maximum is 5 grand per employee. But if you qualified also in 21, you could get another 7 first quarter and another 7 second quarter.
These are big dollars. Last one. I need to document that each employee worked at least 30 hours a week.
Yeah, so that's not the case. There is sort of a threshold of 100 people, and that determines whether you're big or small. If you're small, you get more of the credit. Small is good in this context. And that 30 hours a week is only for determining if you're big or small. So I think a lot of folks will figure they are small, they're under 100. That means they get it. But then you get ERC based on all of the people, the full-time ones and the part-time ones and everything in between. So, that hours test is used, but it's only used to figure if you're big or small. And then it doesn't matter how much people work, you can get the credit on both the part-time and the full-time employees.
Chris, great information.
Sure.
Thanks for joining us for not one, but two roundtables today.
Not a problem.
Thank you for your great work. And I want to again award you the $1 million light bulb as a member of our Brain Trust. Thanks for sharing, guys. Everybody give Chris a virtual round of applause here. We appreciate you and the work you're doing and taking your time today. Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks much, Chris. All right. Let's, and by the way, Sharon from Lightheart Sanders, thank you, Sharon, for posting in there the benchmarking project. If you're interested, definitely get a hold of Sharon and Sharon, Jared, and their team. And again, shout out to the great work that Lightheart Sanders is doing. So thank you. Thank you, Sharon, for putting that in there. And Chris, once again, thanks to you. So, Carrie, how are you today?
I'm so great. Thank you for having me here today.
And if people don't know where you're from, tell us where you're from.
I'm from Colorado, right outside Colorado Springs, in a little town called Fountain.
The great state of Colorado, our
Yes.
second home. So,
Mhm.
well, I've had the pleasure of working with you for how many years has it been? Does it go back maybe 7 or 8 years now? Something like that?
Right at 8. I was a client first and then came on board 4 years ago, working full-time with Qnity.
So you are out there helping people make some amazing changes. And when I thought of this subject here, September being the second new year and getting refocused, I immediately thought of you as someone that could really provide great guidance to our audience. And we thought of a system that we already have in place that most people on this roundtable are not aware of, and it's the 3 C's.
Yes.
So we get to have a little jam together, you and I, and you're going to take me through some exercises. I'm going to set it up and we'll just see how this flows today. Okay.
Absolutely. Very excited. Something I use every day in my coaching practice.
So I'm going to pull some stuff up here and maybe give a little bit of an introduction around this here. We talked about September being the real new year, time for, changes and planning, budgeting, etc. And so we follow a system called 8 seasons. And this is really a time to, in a way, it is a new year because kids are back to school. It's a fresh start and all of that. And we know focus is power. We also know that focus is something that's difficult to obtain. And so we're going to introduce this group to the 3 C's, which is a simple process to create changes for yourself, your staff, your clients, your students. And it's a system based upon what's called closure, clarity, and confidence. So let's just introduce each one. We're going to do a quick slide on each. So Karen, in your own words, talk about closure for a moment and why that helps someone become more focused.
Well, getting closure sometimes can be referred to something that a negative situation, but getting closure is, we can look at periods of times, situations, setting us up to be confident. It's going to start with really identifying an area that you want to get closure on, and then you start to process that. And we know that to move forward, you have to get closure to the past, something that you need to work on. So it's a start. We say getting closure, closing old doors opens new ones.
And you talk a lot about people getting stuck and getting unstuck, and talk about that, how closure and getting stuck and unstuck plays into that.
Yeah. So again, I said I use this every day. We start our coaching calls with getting closure to the week before, or before we can move into something new or want to create something new. We can be stuck and not know it, or we can know it and not know how to move forward. People freeze in times of situations when there's not clarity, right? So this process, this closure, is the first step in alleviating confusion and chaos.
And we're going to show how 9 grids play into this in a little bit. So second area, a brief introduction before we dig a little deeper. It's about clarity, and that's getting clear in a crazy world full of distractions. So talk about this for a moment.
Well, in order to really move forward after you've gotten closure is know where you want to go, right? And really get clear, see it, feel it. And that sometimes is really hard because your brain is processing a lot of information. So say that you wanted to start something new. Well, getting focused, lasering in, getting it down allows you to know what to do, when to do it, and really what you're doing it for.
So what's the age of 2, and why is focusing harder than ever today?
Well, I know working with teams and, worked with individuals and groups, we're living in the age of 2, too much information, too many choices. We're in overload. And so to quiet that noise, you could be working on one thing, but all this other stuff is in your mind and it actually in front of you. So quieting the noise in this age of 2 is hard. It's hard for a lot of people. Their intentions aren't enough to get them through. You need a system, you need tools to help you quiet the noise.
And finally, the third C is confidence. How does that play into this?
Well, we see it that getting closure and clarity confidence is the byproduct of that. Because from that, you know where you've been or that closure piece, where you want to go. Confidence is, I know what to do. I know how I want to feel. I know how I think. And from that, you're able to move confidently into the future, to where you want to go.
Nice. Yeah. All right. So let's, I love this quote. You can't depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus, and so many of us have filters of how we view the universe. I want to spend a few minutes talking about the 9 grid here, Carrie, because most users of the 9 grid only use it in one format, and it's actually can be used in multiple formats. So the 9 grid's a visual thinking tool, and so we have several tools that support the 3 C's. And this particular version of a 9 grid is called a storyboard. Do you want to describe a storyboard for a moment and this tool?
Yeah, so what you're seeing on the screen, and if you're driving, you can't see it, or if you're not able to see what's going on the 9 grid, it's taking the top 3 grids in a row and putting the topics that would fit underneath it. So then you would have those 2 grids underneath in the column that would really relate to closure, that would really relate to clarity and confidence. And what's so powerful about this is we can think, and unless you get it out onto paper, you might not see it, because seeing what you're really thinking about has a different impact than just letting it run around in your head. So what I love about this storyboard process is because our brain, and most people, we need a process to walk us through, or we get lost, we loop around. So seeing it in this order, I've used it many times to help people self-coach, to get closure for themselves, and then follow this through. So what you're seeing is the storyboard in our process. Oh, I love this.
So we're going to do a quick class for them on, and this is from the second module in Money course with about the 9 grid, and so just a fast track explanation. So 9 grids can be used for planning, problem solving, organizing, creating something brilliant, and and getting closure. And this is an example of a mind map where you put it in the center and use, put the idea, the concept, the area where I want to get closure, for example, in the center, and use the outer boxes to get out of your head and down on paper to move the process. So oftentimes, Carrie, we work with teams to get closure using a storyboard. Here's some examples. You can't read this one very well. Let's look at this one. So here's an example of someone getting closure using a 9 grid storyboard. Quite artistic, isn't it?
You mean a mind map? This is a mind map.
Mind map. Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah. So this is a great way to, if you're going to spend a lot of time around closure. So you could do a mind map, put the thought in the center, and all the ideas around it that support it.
Look at this one. This is a great tool, especially for students. And So here is another mind map. Thanks for correcting me. So this is also a closure 9 grid, isn't it? Do you want to describe this for a moment?
Yeah, so sometimes we don't know where we're stuck or that we're even stuck, but we know we're not experiencing an outcome that we want. So if we sit down and say, in this example was a person, a stylist who knew she wanted something different, needed something different to happen, but identified that she had these limiting beliefs. So she spent some time really plugging in what that meant for her, how it was showing up for her. So using this, it allowed her to focus on the areas that she needed to bring clarity to. Like, but I first have to understand what's going on. This has an incredible ending to that story too.
Here's a couple more mind maps that were used for people to get closure, and great for students, right? Students and instructors.
Both. And sometimes the instructor's working with the students, right? So the student may get closure, and then the instructor has a lot of content, a lot of thoughts that they can help expand on or get through. And it's a great way to facilitate conversation with people. We've taught this time in groups where people have had no idea that this was really something was holding them back, and they put this out there and it's changed lives, because then they see, wow, this is what I get to work on, because it starts to bring the clarity of how do I become or be or experience something different in my life. It's going to start with closure.
You and I have seen firsthand the changes with 9 grids, closure 9 grids, people getting out of debt, paying off credit cards, getting out of abusive relationships, going back to school. The examples are just amazing. And, that's what inspires me so much about the 9 grid is the real, we've seen it gritty on the front line, Carrie, you and I, of what a difference this makes. All right, let's keep going here. I want to show the group that this is another way to use a 9 grid. This is in a step-by-step process. It's used a lot in education, isn't it, Carrie, for curriculum design and what have you?
Yeah, so we know that visual tools help people connect to and learn and retain information. And then using this 9 grid to create a step-by-step, people retain, they're more engaged, and you're getting the results that you want. So from learning a new technique to creating consistency, the step-by-step is powerful.
And then finally, we have the storyboard version, which is the mini exercise that we're going to go through today, the column approach. Here's an example example from the course on how a storyboard was used. And in the money course, every single lesson has a simple 9 grid, and it's either a storyboard, mind map, or a step-by-step. So, all right, let's go through, and I'm going to be your your student today. So making space for what's next. And if you want to fly, you have to give up the things that weigh you down, and certainly things weigh us down. So closure, again, is about making space. So let's have a little fun together here, and we'll go through this, and I'll try to use my real life experience to use an example for the group. Okay.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this, you can follow along, even just mentally, but getting this down is going to be really helpful for you as well. So Tom, let's look back over the last 3 months. We started this about the new year. Let's get closure to the last 3 months. And I'm going to ask you to think about something professionally and personally. So where it says closure, 2 areas that you want to get closure on, something that's happened, something that you need to get done. Let's talk about it. What do you want to get closure on, or have you gotten closure on?
Well, the first one is very clear to me professionally. It really has to do with completing the money course, which was a major collaborative effort, partnership with Pivot Point, amazing creative team. I mean, I'm so proud of that, and it's so great to get closure on it. That would be a professional one for sure. Personal one, I guess I'm going to share a little bit of a story here, and you know the story I'm going to share. Hold on here, I gotta come ahead here. All right. getting emotional. I'm getting emotional. Sorry. Okay. So
Mhm.
we've had this really cool tradition, Carrie, you know about it. And
Favorite Qnity story, Tom's story.
so for the group here, you probably haven't heard this story. So when I was 10 years old, our family inherited a business 100 miles away from 750 miles away from our Chicago area home. This business only opened a week a year, had no chance of ever making any money. We'd have to miss the first week of school. Family of 7 kids, drove the priests and nuns crazy, Carrie. And so we would make this annual trek to the South Dakota State Fair and to own and operate a hot dog stand called Shorty's Hot Dog Stand. Amazing experience. And this is the last year. And it sounds, I got a little sad there, but you know what? It's a great thing because closure does open up space for what's next and what's new. And it's just time. We did it 95 years and it's hard for everybody to show up. The stand is dilapidated. So that closure is happening this weekend. In 2 weeks, we'll tell a little bit more of the story about that, Carrie, because there's tons of lessons for business. So anyway, you got me on this one from a personal standpoint. So that's coming up. So that's a major area of closure coming up. So.
Yeah, well, thank you for being so open to share it. And as we get closure, when people start to share, you just experienced, this is where people are putting out their very emotional, very personal things. So now that you celebrating, you got closure, you completed a program, Shorty story, let's move into clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
and
what is,
before you do that, one more second here, I want to just throw something in. Chris gave us an example of closure with some ERC related myths, okay? Myths and truth. So there was an example of closure with one of our guests here that I just wanted to call out. So, all right, let's get on to clarity here.
So clarity is really what's next. And knowing where you're going, you're more likely to get there if you know exactly where you want to go and how you're going to do it. So we think about professionally, this huge win for you. And I also want to say sometimes closure is about looking back and celebrating. A lot of times we don't celebrate enough. So building in time to celebrate is another great closure activity. So we're celebrating all the time, attention, money that went into the money program. What's next professionally?
Impact. You know, it's just all about making an impact. You know, it's one thing to do a course. It's another thing to see lives change and tremendous impact. So I'm super, super clear about that. Once the course is done, now it's about making an impact because I know it can and will change lives. I've already seen it happen, even just in some of our demos and feedbacks and tests. So I feel super clear about that. And I also feel excited and passionate about it. So that would be a professional area of clarity. So.
Love it. So let's go to personal. You mentioned Shorties, family coming. This is the last year. What's next?
You know, I think what's next is new traditions and new traditions as it relates to family. For example, so this is a big gathering that we're having this weekend. We'll have 30 people that are going to come from all over. And the thing that a tradition like that has prevented us from doing is other trips. So anyway, I happen to have a nephew that's going to get married and he's going to be celebrating in Italy. So what's really cool, so closure, using Shorty as an example, opens up the door for something new and better. And so the clarity around more family gatherings like that, opening the door for us to commune is amazing. So that's what I got for you on clarity.
I really love that. And that resonates. Like if that had special fondness for everybody, even the people that have heard the story of Shorties. I fell in love with Shorties. I wanted a Shorties t-shirt. Knowing that it's closing could be a lot of sadness, emotional connection, but you're filling that with something even better, new traditions, something to look forward to. You're clear of what needs to happen or what you want to happen. So if I took us, oh, go ahead. You want to share?
No, you had me reflect on something, Carrie, and silver linings has been a big part of the conversation that we had, especially when the pandemic was really thick, and all of us were so thick into it. And the silver linings that came out of it takes a lot of clarity to actually find the silver linings in something. And I am a unapologetic optimist, and I love to look for silver linings. So I had that thought when we were talking about clarity. So,
well, for people that are processing things, having something that it makes sense allows us to move forward and easier into go and get confident about our decisions and what we have to do. So I silver linings, looking at what could be felt, actually is very healthy and motivating to the next step. So if I took us into confidence, which is our next part of this process, and we went through both of those, and we're using some the professional, this is a very positive thing that happened. You're clear that now that this is done, we've gotten closure, what went well, what didn't, we know that our next step is impact. We want to make an impact. We want to take this to the world, and really, because we know this has been something from the beginning that was needed and missed. And you've done a lot of work to make it happen, Tom, and your team. I wasn't a part of it. I got to observe all that you guys did. And so now it's ready. You're ready to make that impact. Confidence is it could be a feeling, it could be a thinking or a doing. To create this impact, what do you have to do?
And by the way, this is unrehearsed, everybody. We don't, this is live, live and unplugged. And, the things that comes to mind when it relates to confidence is, I believe confidence is all about taking action. I think it's a feeling, but more importantly, it's taking action. I think it was Mel Robbins that said it's the decision to try. In spite of obstacles, in spite of fear, in spite of all the different things that might get in the way, it's the decision to try. So to me, I have a daily ritual, and we actually have a tool around it, and I keep a Qnity journal. Qnity stands for gratitudes and accomplishments. So to me, confidence comes when I'm very mindful personally of what I'm grateful for, and also what I accomplished. It's something called the progress principle. It's every day making progress. So I guess as it relates to impact and it relates to the money course, it's really to just do the things necessary for this to realize its full potential.
And what is that doing? Do the things. I know we have just one little grid, and what you said in that box is do the things necessary. Can you identify one thing that might be?
I
putting you on the spot, not rehearsed.
I would say be unafraid to shine the light on it so the world can see it, because the world needs it and this industry needs it.
All right. So what I did was we just took that general, and you're like, be unafraid. Okay, I'm going to go in, and we're going to go in and shine the light on this because we know the world needs it.
Why did I agree to do this, by the way? I should have had someone else do it.
You're being coached, Tom. I love this, and how powerful this is to really, when you're working with people, that the clearer you can become with this. So even with self, now I will use this word forever with you, like shining the light. Are we shining the light and bringing this to us? So let's move to Shorties. And Shorties, 95-year tradition. You know this is going to be an emotional time. You know it's going to bring new traditions. What's the doingness? I did say feeling, and our thoughts create our feelings, and our feelings create our actions. And if we're clear that we want to shine the light on this, and we're passionate about it, and we know what we have to do, it's more likely going to happen. So these new traditions, creating these new traditions, what are we going to do? And what's the first step? What are some things that you can do to create these new traditions?
Great question, and unprepared for the answer. I would say that, be confident that the time is right, which I am. All good things come to an end. And, to look at what's next and what's better and what's new, something better's out there. I mean, trusting that process and being confident in that. So.
I love that. So we could end this, we will end this, and it's a simple get closure, get clarity, and get confident. I might say to Tom, it might be a good idea to do a mind map 9 grid and putting it in the center around what that confidence piece, setting a calendar. So when you saw that limiting beliefs 9 grid earlier, we would have walked this person through and discovered that I have to get rid of my limiting beliefs. And then you layer in a mind map 9 grid to really like, what are those things? I might ask Tom to do a mind map 9 grid about the impact and what does shining the light look like. So this storyboard really does get the conversation going and allows with ourselves and with others to go deeper and then identify and almost create a check sheet. All right, we're going to schedule time where we're going to talk about where we want to go next. We're going to schedule those times. So it is the start of something that allows you to live in your full potential, have a life, do what you love, and make great money.
You know, let's you and I talk about closure, the 3 C's in practice for a school. Okay. And there's so many applications of it. And, you know, people take their precious time. Thanks to all of you taking your precious time to be with us today. And it's mindful, it is your precious time. And so, Carrie, we have done this a lot, bring 3 C's to businesses. And I'm just imagining a school and how the 3 C's can actually apply to what they do. Any things come top of mind for you? I'm gonna jump in first, okay? A meeting. Many people will use the 3 C's as the basis for a meeting. In fact, I was talking to someone earlier today. They're planning a big summit in 2 weeks with their the entire school leadership team. And we talked about that being a great way to form a meeting. Okay, everybody, thanks for getting together. First of all, let's get closure. This is what's happened in recent times. This is enrollment. This is how the school is doing. So it's passed. Clarity. This is what we can expect for the rest of the year. This is the plan. These are the initiatives. Confidence. This is what we expect everybody to do and take action around that so we can succeed. So it can be used in a meeting session. It can be used for coaching too. But I've done all the talking, and you do this actually more than I do. How else do you see the 3 C's being applied in the school environment?
Well, definitely in staff meetings, team huddles, even in emails that you put out, you can follow that framework. One-on-one coaching, people get stuck. And I can imagine in school setting that people want to give up or they're not focused. You could start the conversation around 3 C's. Let's get closure to this last week. Let's get closure to the client. You have your clients walking in, people are learning new things. That's a really intense time for learning a new technique. How did it go? What would you do different? Walking them through to help them as they grow in their technique, or also sometimes, they're not used to our industry. It allows you to have these conversations with them. Now with team, you can use this on a weekly, here's what we have to focus on. So not so much team meeting, but a process to follow. And then you get closure to the week before as a check off and set them up confident for the upcoming week. You can actually plan an event using, okay, here's what we did last time. Here's what we want to accomplish. Here are the key things we have to do it. So most of the time that we're using 3 C's, it's going to be getting closure to a period of time, getting closure to a situation, and the situation could be positive, or it could be something that you're helping someone get unstuck and move forward.
Perfect. Carrie, thank you so much. I think that, back in the theme of September being like a second new year and a time for what's new and change, and certainly, I think a great methodology and a way to bring life to that is in the 3 C's. And you explain it so well. Thanks for taking me through this exercise today.
Thanks for having me.
There you go. You get another. All right. You've been a multiple recipient of the $1 Million Light Bulb. Everybody, let's give Carrie Perkins a virtual round of applause. And Carrie, you have made a big difference. You are part of the money curriculum. So you've been a big part of it in many different ways. So thank you. So
thank you, Tom. Thank you for having me.
All right. I've got something else for you guys. And one of the things I like to do is I'm going to skip ahead here. I want to feature some what I believe is relevant content from the money program. And we talked about this being a great time of year for planning and budgeting and all that. And so I'm going to use this as an opportunity to give you some insights about budgeting and distinguish between what we call everyday budgeting as opposed to, for example, a full budget. And what I mean by that is, what I mean by that is budgeting is something that for many people is a dirty word. There's actually a program out there called Budgeting Success or Budgeting Sucks. Also, many people think that budgeting is a waste of time. But there's a simpler way to look at budgeting. Budgeting is really part of our daily DNA. And many students, for example, or instructors or other people that may be intimidated by the word budgeting, they routinely do it on a daily basis. And they do it in a way that's very proactive. So this is actually from module number 7, Money Success and Money Planning. Everyday budgeting distinguishes between a full budget and then a limited use budget. A full budget, whether you're an individual, a student, an instructor, whatever, your own personal financial situation, or an enterprise. A full budget is basically money in minus money out, planned versus what's realized. So it's a great way for you to create your own benchmarks for money in and money out. Now, budgeting also can be broken down into very specific areas. And this is one of the things we teach in the class is give spending benchmarks, which come from one of our other modules with spending. And it really makes budgeting very simple and visual. So again, a full budget is all your money in minus all your money out for a period of time. Everyday budgeting is, people do this all the time, budgeting for a vacation, budgeting for a purchase, budgeting for just something tangible you want to buy, budgeting for a car. I was up north with family members, and my niece and her husband were they're building a house, and the word budget came up about 10 times in a very short conversation as they were looking at their space. Well, we wanted to make the garage a little bit bigger, but we don't have a budget for it. Our budget's this. That. So budgeting, I also was reading this magazine about home improvements, and the word budget came up 100 times. So budgeting can be used for limited things such as, housing, renovation, a trip, perhaps as applies to a business, creating a budget for an event, a budget for a specific initiative. And so it's really about making budgeting much more tangible. We also talk about in the course savings funds, the difference between an emergency fund, a short-term fund, and a long-term fund, as well as creating a fund for a specific use. Budgeting also begs the question of what's a need to have and a nice to have. We also talk about the difference between expenses, a fixed expense, rent, a car payment, a school payment, and it's the same each month. Periodic happens very seasonally. For example, insurance, maybe it's a once a year bill. And then variable are things that really vary based upon your earnings. Payroll taxes for a employee is an example of a variable expense because it varies based upon the magnitude of the payroll. So anyway, the other thing that we do to make budgeting very doable is we teach basic spreadsheet. We actually have we teach students how to do a basic Google spreadsheet and really demystify spreadsheets. It's basically columns and rows. So anyway, these are the type of skills that we're passionate about bringing to the marketplace. And so I'm glad I had a chance to share this with you on everyday budgeting. I'm also looking at the clock right now. So as we end today, what will your money story be? We hope you'll become a money school. You can go to qnityforschools.com to book a demo. Closing thoughts, guys. We're taking next week off. It's a shorter week, so we will not be on next week. We've got some amazing guests coming up this month, and got some great sessions. I'll probably tell a little bit about the Shorty story in a couple weeks. Share some colorful experiences from this wacky venture that we've been doing together for a long, long time. It's a ton of fun, a lot of laughter, maybe a couple tears too. You got the tears today. Next time we'll share a little laughter. So anyway, guys, thank you for joining us today. Carrie, thank you for doing an amazing job as usual and your contribution. Chris, thanks for joining us today. Michael, it's good to see you. Let me see who else is with us today. Good morning, Alcott and Amanda and Ann and Caitlin and Christine and Sissy and Diane and Jamie and Jessica. Hello, Kevin. Hey, Lori and Leah and Lisa and Mark. Michelle, Roberto. Hello, Roberto. Hey, Roxanne. Hello, Sam. Hello, Sharon. And hello, Sue. Sharon, say hello to Jared for us. Thanks for being with us today. Guys, you guys have a great Labor Day weekend. I certainly hope that September becomes a time of great change for you, and that you have a second new year, and that when we go into this final 4 months of the year, you have a tremendous amount of prosperity. And Aaron, thank you. Selling hot dogs at the South Dakota State Fair compared to drinking wine and eating great Italian food. That's a pretty good trade there. So, or how did you say that? I think you said it much better than that. Yeah, selling hot dogs at the South Dakota State Fair to drinking vino and eating in Italy. That's a pretty good trade. So guys, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Thanks.